Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor and I have a very different video for you today. As you can see by the title, I'm going to be discussing aphantasia. I'm just going to give you a brief summary of what aphantasia is, how it can affect people, and then I really want to dive in and discuss how it affects my reading personally and my kind of experience with it and how it affects me. So if you've never heard of aphantasia or you're really interested in seeing how it affects my reading life as a self-proclaimed bookworm, please watch this whole video and I'll just get started. To start off, what is aphantasia? Aphantasia is the inability to form mental images of objects that are not present in front of you. So if you close your eyes in your mind's eye and you try to imagine an apple or your childhood home, most people can conjure up that image in their mind, and it'll either be very vivid where it's like a photograph or watching a television, or it's a bit more vague and maybe wishy-washy, but you can still quite clearly in your mind see an image of something. It's estimated that a 2 to 3% of people in the world have aphantasia, and that is the inability to see anything when you shut your eyes. When I close my eyes, it is blank. I see the inside of my eyelids and that is it. And when I'm imagining things, it's not visually at all, which kind of freaks people out and they don't really understand how that works because it's very different from how most people experience things. This isn't something that I discovered until quite recently when it kind of came up with my sister. My sister is an artist and it came up when I was talking to her and I came across this video that if I'll find it I'll leave linked below, and when I watched it I was like, this is me. I can't believe that people experience the world so differently from the way I do, and it really kind of blew my mind. So the phenomenon was first described by Francis Galton in 1880, but it's something that's not really been researched overly much since then. There was a resurgence in like 2015 of people talking about it, and I think some research being done into it in 2015, and that's when most of these videos that I've seen recently are within the past 5-6 years of people being like, I have that and I've just now discovered it. So there's lots of that floating about online, but it's still a thing that a lot of people aren't aware of and have never heard of. So maybe you watching this video, this is your first foray into considering whether this is something that affects you. And the complete opposite of aphantasia, called hyperphantasia, is the condition of having extremely vivid mental imagery, and there's also not much research on that phenomenon either. So what you need to understand is that people with aphantasia don't create images of familiar objects, people or places in their mind's eye. Not for thoughts, not for memories, and not for your imagination. It's nothing, completely blank, all the time, and for me it always has been, and it probably always will be. I doubt this is something that you can just learn. This visual system in my brain is completely lacking. Now, bear in mind that I've done my research on this as much as I can. It's still very relatively unknown, but I'm going to be talking about how this affects me mostly because that is the only life experience I have. And yeah, so take everything I'm saying under that advisement that this isn't fully educational because this is just my perspective and what I've come to understand about this phenomenon. And what I've also learned recently is that it's not just a visual system, it affects all your sensory experiences. So I don't just have a lack of ability to visualize things with my eyes in my mind's eye, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm not confusing everyone, but it also affects my auditory memory and my, well, sense of smell memory as well. Like in my mind, I can't remember how things sound. I don't know how to describe this. This is, so yeah, it's hard to describe. So I can't, like if someone has a conversation with me and they've got an unusual accent, I can't replay that conversation in my mind with the accent, the way that person said it. I just remember the words and the dialogue, like reading a book. I wouldn't then be able to imitate their accent from memory because I don't remember it, if that makes sense. It's probably easier just to kind of stick with the visual stuff because that's easier to describe in a way. Everyone imagines completely differently, so although some people might imagine things really vividly and clearly, other people might have a less so ability to do that. Some people might just not be very creative in their imagination, so that they only really visually remember their memories or things, but they wouldn't necessarily create scenarios the way some people do when like making up a scenario and a story in your head. Some people just don't do that, but it doesn't mean they don't have a visual memory. Like, so for instance, if you try to remember a moment from your childhood, can you remember what your childhood home looks like? Do you remember the colours of the carpet and on the walls? Do you remember the layout of your room with furniture? Can you see that in your mind's eye like you're right there? I cannot. I remember the placement of things, but it's like a list in my head. I remember what I had in my room as a small child, and I remember the colour of the carpet and the colour of the walls, but I can't see that in my head. I just know that as a black and white fact on a bit of paper. And certain things I've kind of perhaps tricked myself into thinking I remember because I've seen photographs and like from family stories. I imagine, I kind of pretend to myself and fool myself into thinking that I remember these things, but I don't. Because of this lack of visual memory, I actually have a very bad memory and don't remember much of my younger years. And I struggle to retain information in that sense just because I can't recall that in my head the same way other people do. So I don't remember it. So that's something that I've noticed that I really struggle with, is my memory and being able to remember things from my younger years. I really don't remember much from my childhood. And even from like going places, when someone says, oh, do you remember going to that museum? I'll be like, not really, because I can't picture it, I can't visualise it, and I can't kind of conjure up the space in my head and memorise and memories from it. So that's why I really like taking pictures, because it takes me back to the place and does the visual memory aspect for me. A photograph does, so I really like that. I'm trying to make this video cohesive, but bear with me, this is a very different kind of video for me. I've also found this kind of struggles arise when someone gives me directions, like you go down that street and then you go left and you go right. I can't visualise that as a map in my head and make those paths. It just doesn't work for me like that. Everything in my mind is just words, but it's my inner voice, which I'll get onto in a second. So aphantasia isn't a bad thing. It's not a disability and it's not anything like that. From what I've been reading, it's just a variation in human experience. It's not a bad thing. It just might make some things different or more challenging, but I'm sure there's lots of positives about it as well. It's just another confirmation that everyone's brains and ability to think and your cognitive function is so different, and that's lovely that everyone's so unique. What also is important to note, that if you have aphantasia, it doesn't mean that you lack an imagination, and it doesn't mean you're not creative. You just go about things in a different fashion. It just leads to an alternative way of thinking. I've also found this list. All the resources that I am talking about, I'll leave linked in the description as well, so you can read more about these things as well, and this is my sources that I'm citing now. So there's another aspect to aphantasia as well that I want to quickly touch on before going on to the reading part of this video. So it's more about like communication and how I kind of talk to people, and maybe this is just me, maybe this is something else going on, but because I can't remember conversations and play it back like a film, I miss the nuances of things, so then I dwell on the words of the conversation. I can't remember the facial expressions of the person talking to me. I can't remember their body language. I can't remember their tone and intonation of the conversation when I'm reflecting back on it at a later date. I just remember the dialogue. So at a later date, I can't then picture and visualise and go over how the conversation went. I've lost all of those visual cues and I just replay the dialogue in my head. That might also just be due to the anxiety. But then I just overanalyse everything and it's hard for me to kind of move past things like that. Another thing for me with aphantasia is that because I don't have a visual memory at all, I really struggle to remember people's faces. I work with a lot of people. It's a big place of work, hundreds of different members of staff, and I recognise people's faces, but I struggle to remember and associate their name with their face, and I really can't remember faces ever at all. It's really bad. So don't ever call me for a witness if I see a crime, because I will not be able to describe what the person looked like and what they were wearing. Never, not at all. I don't remember, and it would be false information anyway, because that's happened before. People in the office would be like, oh, who were you speaking to? And I would say, oh, I can't remember their name, but this is what they looked like. That's not what they looked like at all. I've just pulled that out of thin air and was not relevant to the person who I actually did speak to at all. It takes me a very, very long time to associate names with faces and to continually be able to pull that from memory. And that's something that I struggle with and it frustrates me. And I've known that for a very long time about myself, but I didn't realise that it was possibly caused by aphantasia because I don't have a visual memory. So there may be other tricks of the trade that I might have to develop or employ to kind of help my memory in that regard. Something else that I found in my research of aphantasia, and it does hold true for myself, it is that people with aphantasia find it easier to move on from things and don't hold on to grudges or upset, or they don't perhaps grieve for as long and in the same way. If something bad has happened in my life, when I think back and remember it, I'm not remembering it visually and with such high emotion as other people, because I'm not seeing someone who's passed away in my mind's eye, and that's not a trigger for me. It would be if I was looking at a photograph or a video, but because in my memory I don't have that, I've just got my emotions tied to that. It can be easier for people to move on with their grief, or a squabble or not hold grudges in the same way if you have aphantasia, because your memory works different, so your brain's order of things and prioritise things are different. So that might actually prove to be quite useful for some people. You process your emotions differently, and you might not be holding on to a hurt for as long because it's stored in your brain and your memory very differently. Now I've got all that out of the way, the educational part of the video, I'm sure you're all wondering how this affects my reading, because people who don't have aphantasia read a book and I'm told they see the book in their mind and it plays like a movie. That is baffling to me. I can't. That's crazy to me. I understand why people like that love reading. That's not how I experience reading at all. And at first I feel like a little bit sad because I'm not experiencing reading that way. I don't read a book and see it like a film. I don't imagine what all the characters look like. I don't imagine what the scenery looks like in that way that other people do. Perhaps you do. So I feel like I am missing out from that reading experience myself. For me, it's just the words. And this is where my explanation might get a bit wishy-washy, because it's hard to explain something that you just don't have the words for. For me, it's all about the words. I know what each word means, and I know their relevance in the context of the story and the scenery and the characters. Like, I know what someone who's 5'5", black hair, green eyes, I know what they look like, but not in a visual sense. To me, it's all just descriptions and dialogue and lists. I know what a castle looks like. I know what a house looks like. But when I imagine that, I'm not imagining visually the cracks in the walls and the stained glass windows and all of that. I could, but in a purely word sense, and I don't do that when I'm reading. This is so difficult. People who have visual, people who don't have aphantasia, you're reading a line of dialogue and be like, oh, the character walked up to the castle. You immediately have in your head a castle you've seen before, a castle you've created in your mind's eye before, and you know the colour of the brick, and you know if there's grass, or there's a moat, or there's different windows. You know all of that. I would only have that, not in a visual sense, I would only have that if I paused in my reading and made a list of all the characteristics of a castle that I wanted to have included in that, if that makes sense. I don't know. Please let me know in the comments if this is making sense to you. And if anyone out there has aphantasia too, let me know what your reading experience is like, because this is really difficult to explain. So I don't necessarily do that when I'm reading, because I'm not going to read a paragraph and pause and then list out what I imagine the castle to look like in like a description form, because that takes you away from the story. But I know what a castle is, so I just move on and be like, I know what a castle is, I know what this is. So what I found to realise is I'm not bothered by adaptations in the same way that people who don't have aphantasia are. I don't have an idea of what I thought characters looked like, and I don't always have an idea of what I thought the scenery looked like. For me, adaptations annoy me if the plot's different, or they've missed things out, or if the description's not close enough to what the description in the book was. And a lot of the time I don't really remember what the descriptions were, unless every other chapter it's brought up what someone's eye colour is, or what their hair is, or if it's a big part of their characteristics. I'm not actively remembering that all the time, so it doesn't bother me. So that's probably a good thing. This also means that I'm quite a quick reader, because I'm reading the words and I know what they mean and I know how to piece all that together, but I'm not pausing to create a scene in my mind's eye. So that maybe makes it a bit more straightforward. I've seen a lot of people online who have said that because of this they don't enjoy reading, they don't like it because it's just words, and because they can't imagine it, they don't like reading, they don't enjoy it, they would prefer to watch a TV series, they prefer to watch a film. And I don't know, a lot of people might ask me why I'm still a bookworm even though I don't have those things, and it's because I never knew that I was missing out on that. I've always loved reading. My family are big readers, my sister and my parents. I grew up being a very big reader. It's always been a huge part of my life, and I enjoy it the way I experience it. So I've never known anything different. I only recently found out I was missing out on that experience that everyone else has. So I enjoy it for what it is. I don't know if it's relevant or related, but I don't really watch TV and I don't really watch films. I don't really do much of that. So I don't know if it's just I'm used to experiencing stories and adventures the way that I already do, which is through the word sense, through descriptions. That might also be why I don't like particularly flowery writing, because I feel like it can take ages for someone to get to the point, and that makes it more difficult for me to kind of picture what's going on. Yeah, so in conclusion, having aphantasia is just a different way of experiencing life. It's not a bad thing and it's not a good thing. It's just the way it is. Yes, I'm a bit sad that I'm experiencing reading and I'm perhaps missing out on an experience, but I still love reading and I still thoroughly enjoy the way I read, and I don't think it's a bad thing that everyone is different and that not everyone has aphantasia. So this has already been quite a long video. I'm just now going to add in a bit I forgot to talk about, is I'm sure someone's going to ask what it looks like in my mind and in my imagination. It's obviously just blank when I shut my eyes, and in my mind's eye, when I talk about it being all just in language, I don't see it visually. It's just the narrator in my brain talking. So I feel like that's why I have a mind that doesn't stop talking, is because I need the constant narration to give me input, because when I shut my eyes or when I'm thinking of something or imagining something, it's only the language part that makes that up. I don't have any audio or visuals, so that kind of keeps going. I don't know if this is making any sense. I'm so sorry. Going back to the example of the apple, like for me, imagining an apple, I would just give you a list of the descriptions. An apple is the size of a tennis ball, and they can be red or green. Sometimes they have a stem and a leaf. They're kind of shiny. They might be bruises on it. I'm not imagining that in my mind visually. I'm not seeing it like a photograph or like exactly like the one I have in my fridge, but I know what an apple looks like, and I can list a description of it. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that's everything I want to say about this topic. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you stuck it all the way through to the end, leave a light bulb emoji or a book emoji in the description. I feel like they both sum up what this topic was about, and I would love to start some discussions in the comments. Let me know if you have aphantasia, or if this has now made you think that you might have it. And if you don't have aphantasia, what do you think about the way I experience reading? Can you believe that I'm still a bookworm, even though I don't see things in my mind's eye the way you do? I would love to have a discussion with you all in the comments. And if you liked this video, be sure to like it and subscribe. I've got more videos coming soon, and I love doing book reviews and recommendations on this channel. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.